Hi, it's John Vu and today's lesson is on Yellow by Coldplay from the Trinity College London Initial Drums Rock and Pop syllabus. So Coldplay are a very well-known British band, and this is one of their most well-known songs, which was released on their album Parachutes in 2000. So if you look at the sheet music, we can see in the top left corner it says technical focus. So that's just letting you know this is one of the technical focus pieces from the exam. So we'll talk about what we need to focus on as we go through the piece. And underneath that we've got Yellow, which is the song title. Then we've got intro written in a box there. Beneath that we've got rock. So that's the style of the piece, letting you know this is a rock piece. Then we've got a crotchet equals 87 or a quarter note equals 87. So that is the tempo. So this track is 87 beats per minute, all right? And a crotchet is a beat. Then we've got 2 bars counting written in brackets next to that. So that's just letting you know when you play this with a backing track, you're going to have a 2-bar counting. All right, so remember, a counting sets you up for the tempo. It lets you feel the tempo so you know when you come in, you know what tempo to play at. All right, so it's 2 bars. So normally we hear minims and then we hear crotchets. And we normally count them 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Although technically you're hearing the 1, the 3, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4. But just for ease of counting, people just say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's your 2-bar counting. So it's just letting you know you've got that. And then beneath that, we can see we've got our first bar of music. So at the start of the bar, you've got your clef, your percussion clef, just letting you know this is percussion or drum music on this stave. And then we've got 4/4, so our time signature. So the top number is 4, so that's letting you know we've got 4 beats in our bar. So we just count up to 4 for each bar. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're back to 1, 2, 3, 4. And the bottom number being 4 tells you a beat is a crotchet. Okay, so when we see crotchets or quarter notes in this piece, they are what last the beat. All right, so when you feel those beats in the song, they are quarter notes. All right, so if we look at the first set of notes, we can see we've got a top rhythm there of quavers. So the rhythm is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that is played on the crash cymbal. Okay, so you can see you've got an X on the ledger line there, and that's letting you know it's a crash. And then beneath that you've got another rhythm. We've got crotchet, crotchet, quavers, crotchets. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's your rhythm. And then we play that bass, snare, bass, bass, snare. So obviously your snare is going to be played with the left hand because your right hand's going to be playing the crash. So we're going to put those 2 rhythms together and we're going to play that first groove 4 times through with a metronome. So if you look beneath it, you've got an F there, so that's letting you know the dynamic you play this groove, and that's forte, which means loud, all right? So you've really got to bring the energy. Now when you play on the crash, it's a bit different to the ride and the hi-hat in terms of when we use it for like a groove. So the hi-hat obviously is locked together, so the cymbals don't really move about when we play the hi-hat, when we play a groove. And the ride is very thick and heavy, so it doesn't move too much. It does move a bit, but the crash tends to move a bit more, right? So you really got to find that timing when you play on the crash, because sometimes you might hit it and it's kind of gone away from your stick when you're trying to hit it again, all right? So you've got to really find that rhythm, so when the cymbal moves away from you, it's coming back for the next hit, all right? So it might take you a little while to find that good balance when you're playing that crash as a cymbal in a groove, all right? So just get used to it, but let's just try that first bar in time with the metronome at the song tempo, so 87 beats per minute. We'll try it 4 times through. And then you can see we've got a 1-bar repeat symbol. So that means repeat the previous bar, which is the groove. So we play the groove again. And then we've got another 1-bar repeat symbol, okay, which is repeating the groove. So we play that groove for 3 bars. And then if you look at bar 4, you've got a slight change up. So all we're doing in bar 4 is playing quavers on the 1 instead of a crotchet. Okay, so instead of that 1, 2, you've now got 1 and 2. So bass, bass, snare. So it's only a slight change. Remember, quavers are the same as eighth notes, all right? So let's just try that last bar. We'll try that last bar 4 times through just to get used to playing quavers on the 1 on the bass drum instead of that crotchet like we had in the previous groove. So that's the whole of line 1, so let's try putting that all together. So you've got your main groove, and that's played 3 times, because you've got 2 1-bar repeats, and then you play that little change up in bar 4. So let's try line 1 in time with the metronome. And then we come into line 2, so as you can see, line 2, we've got the same groove that we had in the first bar of the previous line, so that's the main groove. And then we repeat it, we've got 1-bar repeat in bar 2, and then another 1-bar repeat in bar 3, so you play the groove for 3 bars, and then we've got that change in bar 4, so you've got quavers on the crash for the 1 and 2, so we've got 1 and 2 and you've got the bass and the snare that you have in the groove, so you've got a crotchet and a crotchet on the snare, so crotchet on the bass, crotchet on the snare, and then for the second half of the bar it changes, so you've got quavers on the snare drum. So you've got half a bar of your groove, 1 and 2 and then you play quavers on the snare, 3 and 4 and. Okay, so half a bar of groove, half a bar of fill. Let's try that bar 4 times through with the metronome. So now we'll try the whole of line 2. So 3 bars of your groove, and then that little change up in bar 4 where we got half a bar of groove, half a bar of fill. All right, so line 2 in time with the metronome. And then at the end of line 2, you can see you've got a double bar line there, which tells you there's a musical change. So after that line, if you look at line 3, it says verse above it. So that's letting you know it's a new section of the song. So above the first bar, you had intro written in a box. That's letting you know the first section we're playing is the intro. So that was the whole intro, those 2 lines. All right, so let's try and put the whole intro together. So we'll try line 1 and line 2 in time with the metronome. So you've got that groove. All right, you hold it for 3 bars. You have a little change up in bar 4, then we come into line 2 where you go back to the original groove, and then we've got that little change up in bar 4 of line 2 as well. We've got that 2-beat fill. Right, so let's try lines 1 and 2 in time with the metronome. And then we come into line 3 where it says verse, so we're now playing the verse. And the first thing you can see after the clef is a open repeat or a start repeat or a forward repeat marking. Okay, so that's letting you know from that point there. So you see that thick black line, the thin black line, and then the 2 black dots. That's letting you know that that's the start of a repeated section. Okay, so we've got our verse groove, so we've got quavers on the hi-hat instead of the crash. And then we've got our quavers on the bass drum for the 1, crotchet on snare, quavers on the bass drum on the 3, crotchet on snare on the 4, right? So we've got our 1 and 2, 3 and 4, bass, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, and that's played underneath quavers on the hi-hat. So you see how the X has come down now to sit above the top line, which is the hi-hat. All right, so let's give that groove a go in time with the metronome, and we'll try it for 4 bars. And underneath that first bar of the verse groove, you can see it says MF, which is mezzo forte. So that means moderately loud or medium loud, okay? So that's about your normal playing level. So we're just gonna bring it down a bit from forte, which is what we were at for the intro, right? So the verse is a little bit quieter, but it's still like normal level, right? So it's not quiet, it's mezzo forte, medium loud. So as you can see in bar 2 of that line, we've got a 1 bar repeat, and then we've got another 1 bar repeat in bar 3, and then another 1 bar repeat in bar 4. So we play that groove for 4 bars, all right? Because we're repeating it 3 times. So we play it, we repeat it, we repeat it, and we repeat it again, all right? So we're playing that groove for 4 times. And this often happens in drumming. So we play a groove that might be 1 bar long, and we have to repeat that groove quite a few times. So if we just had those 1 bar repeats just written out with no number markings above them, it's really easy to get lost, okay? So that number 4 written there is because we normally feel 4 bar phrases. So we'll naturally feel we're playing that groove for the 4th time, all right? And that 4 being there is just giving you a bit of guidance to say when you feel that 4th bar, that's where you are in the piece. So it just means you don't have to read every individual 1 bar repeat, because like I said, it's so easy to get lost like that. All right, so that's that line, and then if you come into line 4, we've got another 2 1 bar repeats there. So we're playing that same groove for another 2 bars, and you've got 6 there. So this song has got a 6 bar phrase in that verse section. So if you know the song, you'll kind of hear that 6 bar, well, you'll feel that 6 bar, and you'll know it's the end of that phrase. All right, so again, that's just giving you a little bit of guidance having that 6 there, because you'll feel that 6th bar. So it's saying when you feel that, that's where you are. All right, and then you can see at the end of that bar, you've got the end repeat marking, okay, or the backward repeat marking. So that's letting you know that's the end of the repeated section. So if we go back to the start repeat sign, or the open repeat sign, or the forward repeat sign, and it's got a few different names, at the start of line 3, we repeat from there, and we repeat till the end of that 6th time through of that groove, so bar 2 of line 4. All right, so we've got 6 bars of the groove, and then we repeat those 6 bars. Then we come into bar 3 of line 4, and it says trashy HH above that groove. So it's the same groove, but it just says trashy HH above it. That means trashy hi-hat, which is when we take the pressure off of the hi-hat pedal. So we don't want to open the cymbals up completely. We want them still to be touching, but the pressure of the foot has come off. So normally we have a bit of like weight on the front of our foot to keep those hi-hats closed, but now we're going to take the weight off the front of our foot so the cymbals haven't got any pressure on them, all right, so they'll sound trashy. So it's hard to find that point, so spend some time practicing it to get a hold of that trashy sound, but I'll show you now 4 times through that trashy hi-hat groove in time with the metronome, just to show you the sound you're after, and obviously practice it through until you kind of get that sound. Because if it's too closed, it won't sound too different, and if it's too open, it will sound kind of messy and clangy, all right? So you really want to find that point where it sounds nice. So let's try that trashy groove in time with the metronome 4 times through. So if you look at the sheet music, you can see after that trashy hi-hat bar, you've got a 1 bar repeat. So we just play that trashy hi-hat groove for 2 bars. And that brings us to the end of the verse. Okay, as you can see that double bar line there, which tells you the music's changing when we come into the chorus in the next line. All right, so we're going to try the whole verse in time with the metronome. So we've got our groove with the closed hi-hat, the tightly closed hi-hat. We play that for 6 bars, then we repeat those 6 bars, and then we play the trashy hi-hat groove. So it's the same groove, just making that hi-hat trashy for 2 bars. All right, so we got 14 bars in total. Let's give that a try with the metronome and just work on that transition from a closed hi-hat into a trashy hi-hat, making sure it's nice and smooth. All right, let's give that a go with the metronome. So now we're going to try the intro and the verse in time with a backing track. Okay, so remember you've got that 2-bar counting. You're going to hear 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So make sure you really listen to that to feel the tempo so you come in at the right tempo, all right? Make sure you're in time with the rest of the band. We're playing rock, we're at forte, so we've got to bring in a lot of energy into the beginning of the piece as soon as you come in with the intro. Hold the groove, keep it solid, make sure that you find a nice good point of playing that crash. Remember, you want to play on the shoulder of the cymbal to really make it crash out. You're playing their first groove for 3 bars, a little change up in the 4th bar, back to the main groove for 3 bars again, a little change up with a fill on the next 4th bar, then we're into the verse. So the verse groove drops down to mezzo forte. You can see MF beneath the verse, right? That's letting you know it's mezzo forte, which is moderately loud or medium loud, which is about your normal playing level. So it's a little drop down from forte. So make sure you have that nice transition from forte on the intro into mezzo forte into the verse. Make sure you hold those quavers on the hi-hat. They're nice and evenly spaced and solid, keeping that backbeat and bass drum rhythm nice and solid and consistent. Don't forget to repeat the section in the verse. And then we've got that trashy hi-hat. So again, make sure that transition into the trashy hi-hat is nice and smooth for those last 2 bars of the verse, all right? Let's give it a try with the backing track. So that brings us to the chorus at line 5, which is bar 17. You can see chorus written there in a box, just letting you know we're at the chorus. Now this groove is similar to the groove we had in the intro, the main groove of the intro, but you can see how the X has dropped to the top line, which tells us we play on the ride cymbal. Okay, so the ride cymbal is playing quavers, and then we've got on the bass drum, crotchet on the snare, 2 quavers on the bass drum, and then a crotchet on the snare drum. So our bass and snare rhythm is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Bass, snare, bass, bass, snare. And that's underneath those quavers on the ride cymbal, okay? So let's give that a groove a go in time with the metronome. And as you can see, the dynamic has gone back to F, which is forte, all right? So we want to pick this back up nice and loud. So you might want to give it a little bit of shoulder of the stick on the ride cymbal just to bring a bit more energy and just to make it a bit louder. Okay, so let's try that groove in time with the metronome. So we can see we've got 2 1-bar repeats after that groove. So we'll play that groove for 3 bars. Then we've got a little change up in the last bar of that line. And all we're doing there is adding an extra snare drum on the and of 4. So we've got the same thing for the 1. So we've got bass and then the 2 on the snare. Then we've got 3 and on the bass drum. Then we've got 4 on the snare. But we've also got the and of 4. So we've got bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, snare. And that rhythm would be counted 1, 2, 3 and 4 and. So we're going to play that underneath the ride cymbal. So let's try that bar 4 times through with the metronome. And now we'll put that whole line together, all right? So we've got that main chorus groove on the ride cymbal. We play that for 3 bars because we've got 2 1-bar repeats. And then we've got that little change up in the 4th bar. So let's try that whole line in time with the metronome. So moving on to the next line, so we're still in the chorus, so we've got that same groove, but we've got a crash cymbal on the 1. Alright, so we're just going to come over and crash on the 1 and go back to the same groove there. And then we've got a 1-bar repeat written in bar 2 of that line. Now, we are going to repeat the previous bar, but we're not going to include the crash on the repeat, okay? And that's normal in drum music. Often we'll get a groove that starts with a crash cymbal, and then the second bar is the same groove, but we don't want to play the crash, all right? So we're not going to include the crash when we repeat that bar, all right? It's a bit confusing, but like I said, you'll get used to that as you read more drum music because it's very common. And normally, if the music wants you to include that crash, it will have the crash written in the bar with the 1-bar repeat, all right? Which I'll show you when we see it in a piece of music. But for now, just know when we repeat that bar, we're not going to include the crash. We're just going to keep it as a normal ride cymbal. All right? So if we look at bars 3 and 4 of that line, so in the 3rd bar on that line, you've got a top rhythm of a crotchet on the crash, then we've got a crotchet rest on the 2, and then a minim rest on the 3 and the 4. So you're just going to play a crotchet on the crash for that top rhythm. And that loopy line or that time marking there is just letting you know to let that crash ring. Underneath that, you've got a crotchet bass drum rhythm. So we're just going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bass drum. And if we come into the next bar, we've got a minim rest on the top rhythm. So we rest for the 1 and 2. And then for the 3 and 4 and, so you've got quavers there, 3 and 4 and, we play the floor tom and snare together. So for that bar, you've got rest, 3 and 4 and on the floor tom and snare at the same time, all right? Underneath that, you've got crotchets on the bass drum again. So for those 2 bars, those crotchets keep time, all right? Say on the bass drum. So you're going to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bass drum. Then above that, you just got a crash on the 1st bar on the 1, and then you've got 3 and 4 and on the floor and snare drum in the 2nd bar, all right? So we're going to try those 2 bars, and we're going to try it 4 times through in time on the metronome. So just make sure you hold that time on the bass drum, right? So be really solid with those crotchets. Make sure those other notes just grip hold of those crotchets, right? So this is your anchor on the bass drum. It's got to be really solid. So really try and practice that through. Let's give it a go with a metronome. And now we'll try the whole of that line, okay? So line 6 of the piece. So you crash in with the groove on the ride, and then you've got 1-bar repeats. Remember, when you repeat that bar, don't hit the crash, just stay on the ride cymbal there. And then we come into that section where we keep time, keep the crotchets on the bass drum, crashing on the 1 on the 1st bar of that 2-bar, and then we've got the 3 and 4 and on the floor tom and snare, all right? So we're putting the whole line together. Let's try that with a metronome. And that brings us to the last line, and this groove in the 1st bar is the same groove you played in bar 4 of the intro. Okay, so we've got quavers on the crash, and then we've got a bass drum and snare drum rhythm of 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So we've got quavers on the 1, crotchet on 2, quavers on the 3, crotchet on 4. So that's bass, bass, snare, bass, bass, snare, all right? And you've got 1-bar repeats there. So you've got a 1-bar repeat in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th bar of that line. So that means you play that groove for 6 times through, right? You play it for 6 bars, and you can see you've got that 4 written above the 4th bar again, just letting you know, because you're repeating it, Once you feel that fourth bar, that's where you are. So it just helps you keep a count of all them 1 bar repeats. All right, then in the last bar, so you can see that's the last bar because we've got that final bar line there, that thin black line, and then the thick black line let you know it's the final bar of the piece. You've just got a crash on the 1 with the bass drum. All right, and you see that loopy line again, that time marking, just let you know you let the crash ring, and you've got that crotchet rest on 2 and the minim rest on 3 and 4. All right, so let's give that last line a go with the metronome, so the whole of the bottom line of the piece. Now we're going to try the whole chorus, okay, in time with the metronome. So just making sure we can get all them transitions, all right? So we've got that chorus groove, slight change up at the end of that first line of the chorus. Then we've got that crash cymbal. Then we've got the 1 bar repeat, not including the crash. Then we've got that section when we're playing the crotchets on the bass drum, all right? So we've got to transition nicely into that section. And then we transition into the bottom line, which is the groove on the crash cymbal, okay? So there's a couple of transitions you've got to get in there, so just make sure they're nice and smooth. So let's try that chorus in time with the metronome. And now we're going to try the chorus in time with the backing track. Okay, so keep it all in time, all nice dynamics. Remember, we're at forte for the chorus, and make sure you're in time with the other instruments in the piece. Okay, so spend this time locking in with the music, but also making sure those transitions are still smooth, all right? So make sure your drum part sounds good and it's also in time, all right? So let's try that chorus in time with the backing track. Right, so now we've gone through the whole piece. We'll talk about the technical focus. So there's 2 elements of a technical focus for this piece that would be examined if you take your exam. All right, so the first one is transitions. We spoke about this. We've got different grooves, different parts in this song. So we just need to make sure all those transitions are nice and smooth. So when you go from one part to another, or one groove to another, or a groove to a fill, that change is nice and smooth, all right? There's no abruptness or like, yeah, just don't interrupt the fluidity of it all, okay? So make sure all the transitions are nice, and obviously that takes practice. Initially they might be a bit rough, so it might be when you change from one thing to another, it kind of gets a bit clunky, all right? So just keep working it and make sure you can change from like the hi-hat to the ride to the crash and so forth, right? So make sure all the transitions are smooth. And the other element is the bass drum solo. So in bars 23 and 24, so that's part of the chorus, you've got like that bass drum crotchet rhythm, all right? So just make sure that's really solid and in time, okay? So that's the other part of the technical focus they'll examine you on. So it's the 2 things to really work on this piece, and that's the 2 elements of the technical focus. So we're going to really try and include that when we play the whole song, all right? So we've got the whole piece together now. We've got the intro, the verse, and the chorus. We've got different grooves, different fills, different parts. We've got different sections, obviously, and we've got different dynamics. So we start forte, then we go to mezzo forte for the verse, and we're back to forte for the chorus. Right, so make sure we get those dynamic changes in. But have fun with it, all right? It's a great song. It's really fun to play. Spend some time on it, all right? Really practice it. But now let's try it, the whole song in time with the backing track. So I hope you enjoyed that song. Remember to really work on the two elements of the technical focus as well. And also when you practice the parts, you don't have to practice them at song tempo. So remember, that's the target tempo. If you struggle with any of the parts, just reduce the tempo to a tempo you're comfortable with. Make sure it sounds good, okay? That's the important thing. You don't want to play fast and it be all rushed and rough. Play at a tempo you're comfortable with, work at it, get used to the grooves and the fills, and then slowly bump up the tempo until you get to that song tempo, and then you can play it with the backing track. All right, I know it's fun to play it with the music, but really don't rush to play it to the music. Make sure you work on your craft, right? We're drummers, we want to be good drummers, we want to sound good, and that's the most important thing, all right? Sound good, then increase the speed. Make sure you're still sounding good as you increase the speed, and then once you're at the song tempo, have fun with it. Play it to the music and have fun. Really bring that across in your playing. If you're having fun and you're enjoying it, and you'll only have fun if you're playing it nice and it sounds nice, all right? So that's why it's good to spend that time practicing at comfortable tempos. So when it feels good, you feel good, all right? You're happy and you're really portraying that in the music, all right? You can really work on how you're playing it, not just what you're playing. So spend the time practicing what you're playing. Once you're comfortable with what you're playing, work on how you're playing it, all right? How you're making it sound. So really bring a good energy to this song because it needs it, and have fun with it. Spend some time practicing, and we'll see you in the next lesson.